1, 2, 3. Mic check.
Got her.
Ninety-minute warning. So please get those NFL bets and DFS lineups in. But wait, you have questions. We have the guys who have answers. By the way, Jessie, Coffield, Emerson, Lotzia, this is The Sweat. Who's joining us today? Adam Levitan, Pat Mayo, the Sports Pope, Mike Francesa, and so much more.
Including Diego the dog.
Oh my God, that's important.
Can't forget that.
The number one guest on the show.
Here's the thing though, we would love to hear from you as well. Isn't that fantastic? Be a part of the show. However you're watching us, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever, hit us with all your DFS
look at the
and
graphic.
Sportsbook questions, and we'll do our best to answer them in the show.
All right, for now, let's say hello to our panel. Hello, panel. We have DraftKings contributors Jeff Ulrich, Reed Fowler, and Rosalie Michaels, the fantasy girl, smack dab in the middle. Okay, let's put a spin on some headlines this morning. Let's start with this Chargers-Dolphins game, guys. Jeff, I want to start with you here first. Doesn't sound like Mr. Gordon's going to be playing unless it's an emergency situation. So thoughts on that? Thoughts on the long-term impact here of Austin Eckler? I mean, this is probably the last game you can really ride or die with this guy, right?
Yeah, that's to say the least there, Emerson. I mean, this is... like I said before in the week, I mean, this is RIP Austin Eckler season. And it's not necessarily that I think that Melvin Gordon is like hugely better than Austin Eckler. I mean, we've seen him be amazingly effective in the workhorse role, but it comes down to this. I mean, Anthony Lynn has come out and said, like, Melvin Gordon is clearly our guy. So Anthony Lynn believes that to win, the Chargers need to play Melvin Gordon. And I think starting next week, you're going to see that. It might not come with like a 70 or 80% snap rate or like a 80% workload right off the bat, but slowly but surely that Austin Eckler RB1 is going to get cut into a RB2 every week, where he's probably going to see max 40% of the snaps. And he could still be effective in that role, but this is really the last week that you're going to really be able to play him with like a ton of confidence for that big game upside.
Rosalie, rest in peace to Austin Eckler's fantasy value after today, huh?
Yeah, you know, we don't get to see the super stud Eckler anymore. But, you know, if you look at last year when he was splitting time with Melvin Gordon, he still was averaging 12.1 fantasy points per game, which isn't a ton. But if you look at his two highest games throughout the season last year, they actually were with Melvin Gordon in there. The two highest games came against KC and Arizona, and he had over 25 fantasy points in those games. So you can still roll him out, like Jeff said, in certain situations where he's still going to get a good amount of touches and touchdown opportunity.
Okay, Reed, we now know that he is officially active, Melvin Gordon, but again, reportedly only going to play in emergency situations.
Yeah, Eckler, I'm not too down on Eckler for the next couple of weeks, especially with that Justin Jackson injury, who should be out in a few weeks, and these guys have said it, right? We see what Eckler can do with Gordon in. Gordon is going to be the number one guy. He's going to get up to at least 20 touches on average in the next 2 to 3 weeks, but Eckler last year averaged about 10 touches per game. I think that increases. I think he's shown too much currently in the first 3 games, to really warrant more touches, so we can get up to 12 to 15. And if you look at this offensive line, which has kind of gone unnoticed in all of this, with Eckler being extremely productive, they're top 10 in adjusted line and in adjusted sack rate. And so they're playing extremely well. It might be part and parcel of both, right? Playing well, Eckler, and then also the offensive line. But I don't mind it too much. If you look at their next 3 matchups, they're not great, but at the same time, I think it can be used.
Rosalie, Redskins, Giants. We want to know, Daniel Jones, can he do it again? And what is life going to be like without Saquon Barkley?
Yeah, you know what? That was a very exciting game to watch him in last week. I think Daniel Jones is very exciting. We're going to see a lot more of that out of him. I mean, that was a pretty solid Tampa Bay defense leading into what he did to them last week. Now he gets Washington. Obviously, that's a great matchup. But I look at what Daniel Jones has brought to this New York Giants offense, and to me, it's very akin to what happened last year with Baker and Lamar Jackson in refiring those offenses. So I like what he's doing. I think that it's going to be good for the team. When it comes to Saquon, Wayne Gallman is not exciting at all. He's that must start because he is a lead RB1 in where you're looking at such a shallow pool of running backs to choose from. So, but you look at his numbers, and even when he had more touches in 2017, he was getting 4.3 yards per carry in those 13 games, 48 total targets, but only 1 total touchdown. So don't expect Saquon numbers out of him, but at the shallow running back depth, you're going to have to start him in season long, not in daily fantasy. I'm not touching him.
Reed, Daniel Jones, you interested? I mean, how is he going to do without Saquon Barkley?
I think he's going to do well, considering, right, that this is only going to be his first full start of his NFL career. He's got a full week of practice with the ones. And so you like that coming into this week. And if you look at Washington, which is kind of what we're talking about, right, you have to include that secondary against an opposing quarterback. They give up the 4th most DK fantasy points to fifth most to opposing quarterbacks. And then also when you look at what Daniel Jones can do, which is why I think we're a little bit down on Gallman in terms of his ceiling, is that Jones he can rush. He can use his legs to either get first downs in terms of projected run plays, but then also if he needs to elude any sort of pass rush from the defense. And Washington gives up the 4th most rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks. So yeah, I like it.
Jeff, where do you sit on this one?
I think Daniel Jones long-term is going to be just fine. I mean, especially as long as Evan Ingram and Sterling Shepard stay healthy, and he's got those kind of dual weapons to sort of work back and forth against. But I think the problem this week is actually the other side. Terry McLaurin out, as we're going to talk about later probably, but I think that really limits how many points the Washington Redskins are going to be able to put up. And I'm just not sure that you're going to see the same heavy pass scenario where the Giants were in complete comeback mode that whole game last week. I think they could easily get out in front, and you just see a less muted fantasy day just because of game flow purposes. So I'm not necessarily as high on him this week as I was as a lot of other people, but long term, I think he's going to be fine, Barkley or no Barkley. He's a good quarterback.
Reed, how we feel about Kyle Allen leading Carolina against the Texans here? This Texans secondary actually isn't as good, I think many people expected it to be.
Yeah, it wasn't that good last year either. And if you just look at this matchup too, and if you want to pivot off the guy we just talked about, Daniel Jones, who's coming in at 18%, you got Kyle Allen probably coming in at 5 to 6% at most in GPPs. So I think he is a viable option if you look at this offense in general. And that secondary, I think Curtis Samuel is a nice play. I think Greg Olsen. So if you want to talk about stacks, not named Will Dissly and the guys over at Seahawks with Tyler Lockett and Russell Wilson, I think this is an interesting one for those bigger GPP tournaments. Because again, he is a guy, if you just look at these offenses and these quarterbacks now, they're in these what we call air raid offenses in college. They throw it a ton. When you look at what they're able to do with their legs, they can elude that pass rush. And so I do like it because his price tag and his ownership are conducive for those bigger GPP tournaments.
Jeff, he threw for 4 touchdowns last week, and this Texans defense through 3 games has given up more than 900 yards through the air and 5 scores.
Yeah, it's kind of like the opposite story of Daniel Jones for me. Long term, I'm not sure if Kyle Allen is necessarily going to be like the answer for the Panthers, or if he's necessarily viable as a starting QB. I mean, we'll have to wait and see, and I'm certainly not skilled enough to judge that right now. But I think his matchup this week is a lot better than Daniel Jones, because I think you could see Kyle Allen in the same type of situation you saw Daniel Jones last week, which is playing catch up. I mean, you mentioned their pass defense. They have an older Jonathan Joseph on one side, Bradley Roby on the other, kind of been ineffective the last couple of years. It's a really good spot for the Carolina wide receivers, especially because Houston's run defense is pretty good. So you could see McCaffrey get stacked up a bit, and Kyle Allen, like I said, just in heavy pass mode against a good Houston offense. So I think this is a really sneaky game to stack. And like Reed alluded to, I think Kyle Allen's a perfect pivot off of Daniel Jones today.
Hey, Rosalie, how much would you consider playing Kyle Allen, whether DFS or season long?
Yeah, he's interesting to me just because I love a quarterback with swagger, and he has some, right? I read a story where he was a huge fan of Roger Staubach growing up, and his dad knew him. So he was 10 years old. Roger Staubach sent him a a signed autograph picture, and he sent a signed autograph picture back to Roger Staubach. So I really like that kind of swagger. But, we're talking about how this Texans defense is kind of a little bit looser than we expect. But you have to remember, they also face Drew Brees and Phillip Rivers on the road. So those numbers are kind of inflated because of that. I like Kyle Allen. Like the guy said, I don't know that he's the answer, that he's going to replace Cam Newton, but and he's going to have to avoid JJ Watt this week. So I think it's going to be an interesting week. I'm not going to be huge on him, but he'll be interesting this week.
Jags and Broncos here.
Talk to me, girl.
Jeff,
Jesus.
we know that Jalen Ramsey is going to be a game-time decision. If he doesn't play, what's the impact for that on the Broncos, specifically their passing game?
Obviously, if he doesn't play, it really opens up the field for Courtland Sutton and to a lesser extent, Emmanuel Sanders. Sutton is probably the guy that Ramsey might see the most on the outside, although A.J. Boye is still there. So it's not like it's just free reign for these Broncos receivers. And remember, you still have lead-footed Joe Flacco back there. The Jags pass rush came to play last week. That is the pass rush I had been waiting to see. So if they bring that same intensity, it's really not going to matter who's on the outside guarding for Jacksonville, because Joe Flacco is not going to have time to throw the ball. It's still a very dicey situation for Courtland Sutton. I think one thing to consider is that without Jalen Ramsey, you could just see the Broncos offense just be a little bit more effective and maybe push that game to hitting the over or just becoming a bit of a closer game, because I really do like Jacksonville in that spot, even though they're coming in as away underdogs. But without Jalen Ramsey, I think it does give the Broncos a bit more of a chance of covering them.
Rosalie, what do you think the impact is if Jalen Ramsey is out today?
Yeah, obviously Jeff said a lot of it. I think, what we have to look at, he did let up 99 yards last week in coverage. So if he did play, I still don't think that's a bad thing. I think what's working against Denver's offense this week is it is supposed to be pretty windy there in Mile High. And, Flacco's not the most accurate to begin with. And with the wind there, I'm a little worried about it. But yeah, I think you got to play Courtland Sutton if Ramsey's not in there, just because you probably don't have a better choice in season long. But for daily, I don't think I'm going anywhere close to him. With Jalen Ramsey, if he is there, he's let up 14.5 fantasy points, 10 fantasy points, and then 14.9 fantasy points. So not great. And like Jeff said, A.J. Boye is still there. So I'm not liking the Denver wide receivers at all this week.
Reed, do you think Ramsey is going to play? And if he doesn't, Emmanuel Sanders, Courtland Sutton, are you more interested in those guys if he's not on the field?
No, and I appreciate Rosalie bringing up the wind, because we have one Stephen Buchanan who hates talking about the weather. So it makes me extremely happy to know that Stephen is somewhere just burning up inside. So thank you, Rosalie, for that. But going back to this game.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I will respectfully disagree with Rosalie. I hope you have a better option than Courtland Sutton on season long. Go on the waiver and get Paul Richardson or someone else if he's still out there. Courtland Sutton has been terrible. And if you just look at that team, Emmanuel Sanders is the guy that's getting all the red zone looks. He's getting most of the targets from Flacco. We know Flacco likes to target one of his receivers and or tight end, but there's no tight ends to be mentioned in season long in Denver. But Jalen Ramsey, if that back's okay, I think you have to be a little wary of it. But anyone that I'm attacking in this game is going to be Phillip Lindsay. Royce Freeman is a little questionable with the shoulder injury. I think you saw him back to what we saw last year with Lindsay. He's at that price tag of around $5,200. I think it's a good pivot off of some of the other guys that we're going to talk about later.
Cool. Keep those questions coming. We're going to get to them right after a quick break. Also game spreads. But first, we got Adam Kaufman catching up with Mike Francesa about some of the big games on today's slate.
Titans on the road again, this time in Atlanta. The Falcons feeling a sense of urgency. Who wins?
Lot of nonsense coming out of the Titans. A lot of talk coming out of the Titans. Unhappy with the coach, unhappy with the quarterback. A lot going on there. I think Atlanta. I don't love the game, but I think Atlanta.
Patriots, Bills, each 3-0, but Tom Brady's 30-3 lifetime against Buffalo. New England's dominated everyone so far. Is this one over before it's even started?
No, this game's going to actually be close, because I tell you what, the Pats are very banged up on offense. Very banged up, and Buffalo's defense is real. As long as they don't turn the ball over, I think the Pats will win a close game. I think it'll be low scoring, and I would not be surprised if it's close. I don't think the Bills will win it, but I'll tell you, the Pats are hurting on the offensive line. They're hurting at wide receiver. They're hurting in the backfield. Their offense did not look good against the Jets. Even Tom has had trouble practicing a little bit. He's been banged up. He called it, getting old. The bottom line is their offense does not look good. Their defense looks great. Their defense wins it. Close game, and their kicker hasn't been great either. So beware. This could be a low-scoring game, and it could come down to a field goal.
And they may not cover. How about that?
I wouldn't be surprised if they don't.
Whenever the Chiefs play, big points are expected. This weekend, no exception, Detroit. Is there any doubt as to which unbeaten is going to prevail?
No, I think the Chiefs are still going to win these games 9 times out of 10. I don't think this will be the 1 time out of 10. This will be 3 wins in 4 weeks on the road for the Chiefs. They won the game last week at home. They had a win. It'll be a 4-0 start. I think the Chiefs win, yeah.
Colts have won 7 straight at home. They've got the Raiders in Indy this weekend. And Jacoby Brissett, will his bunch pick it up?
They're not playing badly. They're playing okay. I think they win. I think the Raiders lose again. I think the Colts win. The Colts are not doing a bad job. Brissett's playing okay.
Unsurprisingly, Chargers projected to pummel the Dolphins in South Beach by at least 2 touchdowns. Fins have been outscored 133-16 in the 3 games. Ever a reason to not think a team, won't cover against Miami?
Well, this is the 1 week. If the Fish are going to cover, this will be the game that they cover. They're more than 2 touchdown favorites. They got a West Coast team coming east. An early game for the West Coast team. I think this could be a sluggish game for the Chargers. I still call them San Diego. I probably always will. But I think the Dolphins lose again. But I would not be shocked if this one was. I wouldn't. Let me put it this way. Last week I went on the Dolphins. I went on the Cowboys. I thought they'd win big. They didn't even play well in the first half. They still covered. I'm not sure about the Chargers covering here. I just know that the Dolphins won't score a lot of points.
Giants are missing Saquon Barkley, but have a relatively easy test coming in at home with the winless Redskins. 2 in a row for Daniel Jones?
Should happen here, but I need to see the Giant defense play better. They still gave up the big play, and I could see them giving up some big plays here. This line should be much more than 3. The fact that it's 3 shows you that they don't think the Giants are very good. They're telling you right now that this game's a pick 'em. That's what they're telling you. They're telling you right now the Giants are as bad as the Redskins, and that's not pleasant thought if it's true. Right now, I think the Redskins are only ahead of the Dolphins in the whole league. So with that being the case, it tells you the Giants are pretty far down too.
Lamar Jackson has perhaps overachieved so far. Baker Mayfield has certainly underachieved. So which QB stands out when the Browns and Ravens clash?
I think the Ravens will play better. This is a game, though, that I think this will be the Browns are a talented team. They're being terribly coached. They're terribly undisciplined. Their quarterback's playing terribly. So there's so many things not to like about them, but they are physically talented on both sides of the ball. I think this is the game they come up with a huge effort, or I think they're in a complete free fall. So in this game, I'll go Ravens, but I'll go inside the touchdown, and I think it'll be a close game, and I think the Ravens will win it. Their quarterback will play better, but I do think it'll be a close game.
Kyle Allen filled in admirably for Cam Newton in Arizona. He was terrific. He'll start again in Houston now. The Texans have won 2 in a row. The Panthers
played as well as Jones did. He played as well as Jones did. He was great. He had 4 touchdown passes, no interceptions. Had a great game.
Can he do it again?
Probably not. I would doubt it. I'd be surprised if he catches anybody by surprise this time. Here's the thing: the Texans, though, are a bad favorite. They're a good dog. They're a bad favorite. They usually play all their games really tight, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was a tight game. I think the Texans will win, but I would not be surprised if it was a tight game.
Welcome back to The Sweat. Time for a little segment we call Hitting the Books. Joining me now is Hal Tendler, DraftKings Sportsbook Manager at Resorts Atlantic City, Brad Carpenter, DraftKings Sportsbook Manager at Scarlet Pearl Casino, and Gavin Mercado, DraftKings Sportsbook Manager at Del Lago. You guys are here to give us an on-the-ground view of what's happening at DraftKings Sportsbooks around the country. Hal, let's start with you. Which teams are getting the most action and moving lines?
So we had one gentleman bet 5 figures on 4 different underdogs. He had the Cincinnati Bengals plus 4.5, Oakland 7, Tennessee plus 5, and Washington Redskins plus 3. So they're the teams we're getting the most action on right now.
Brad, what about you? What are you seeing?
Well, just like most weeks, our biggest bets are all on the New Orleans Saints. Very popular.
Gavin, what about you?
We're seeing a lot of action on the Buffalo Bills right now and New England Patriots. Both 3-0 teams. A lot of Bills being excited down here. That's what we're seeing right now.
Brad, what's the biggest bet you've seen so far?
Just usually about in the few $1,000s down here. We're taking mostly parlay action. So a lot of $100, $200 parlay teams.
Gavin, what about you?
What are we seeing so far? We're seeing a lot of prop bets come in so far. The biggest action we've seen is we got a couple 5-figure parlay bets out there, but nothing yet. It's still 12 o'clock. We'll see what happens around 1.
Hal, what's the biggest bet you have seen so far?
A gentleman bet 4 different games, 22,000 minus 110 to win 20,000. So they're our biggest bets thus far.
What have been the most popular prop bets, Gavin?
Anything to do with the Bills, the Josh Allen over and unders. They got a lot of prop bets on the first player to score in the Bills game today. So far, that's what we've seen.
Hal, most popular prop bets you've seen?
We had a popular one that Miami Dolphins would be the first team to score a field goal today. And an interesting one for you, Gavin. We had a guy bet Devin Singletary to win the Offensive Rookie of the Year. It's $500 to win $25,000. Buffalo Bills.
Buffalo popular. What about you, Brad?
We'll be opening up a whole page of props on tonight's Cowboys-Saints game, and pretty much all those are real popular down here.
Hal, are there any other special trends or events at your book that you'd like to point out?
Yeah, today we're having a $10 online free promo bet and also a weekly bet of $5 for free bets today online with the DraftKings.
Brad, what about you?
Today we're it's a little bit slower than last week. We had Joe Horn from the Saints in the casino doing some photo ops and signing autographs. So today it's just kind of more back to business as usual. Gavin,
what about you?
Well, today I agree with Bill over there. It's back to business for us. We had Bill Smith in here 2 weeks ago. We got a couple, drink specials, food specials going on, but we're just taking action at the book all day.
Very exciting, gentlemen. Amazing stuff. Thank you for giving us an on-the-ground view of what's going on at DraftKings Sportsbooks around the country. Now for a special treat, let's toss it over to the underdog parlay of the week with Diego. What's up, everybody? I'm Jessie Coffield. This is Diego, and we're here for this week's edition of Underdog Parlay of the Week. This week, we have 3 team parlays. The first parlay features the Browns, who face the Ravens, the Panthers, who face the Texans, and the Titans, who play the Falcons. The second parlay option is the Jaguars, who play the Broncos, the Lions, who host the Chiefs, and the Redskins, who take on the Giants. And the final parlay features the Vikings, who play the Bears, the Saints, who play the Cowboys, and the Bills, who host the Patriots. Diego is going to pick which of our 3 parlay options is getting boosted. And bettors, you're going to want to get in on this action because last week's parlay hit. Ready, set, go, Diego! Diego has spoken. We have a parlay odds boost of the week. Come here, you did it! You're doing so good. Who's doing good?
All right, back here on the Sweat, we've got DraftKings contributors Steve Buchanan, Julian Edlow, And we have Mr. Gary and Thorne on the horn as well. Gentlemen, it's high or low time, so are the following spreads too high or too low? Plus, I'm going to need a DFS pick from each game. Let's start, though, with that parlay of the week that Diego has selected, the Jags, Lions, Washington. What's your take on this one, Steve?
I liked it until this morning when, we got the news that Matt Stafford just was having issues with his hip there. I just don't think that they can pull out this win here against the Chiefs. So if this was the beginning of the week, I would have liked it a lot more. But I think the Lions are going to be what ruins this really nice parlay from Diego. It's really a shame because Diego looks like a great dog. Picked a good one here, but I just don't think the Lions are going to be able to make it.
Jules. Did Diego screw this up?
Diego did screw this up. The Denver-Jacksonville game is a coin toss. You can talk me into the Jags there. That's fine. But I really love the Giants, even against the spread, -3. I just think that they're the better team than Washington. A couple of trash defenses, but I think the home team, the better quarterback, and Daniel Jones pulls it out. And then, going against Mahomes and the Chiefs right now is really tough with Stafford dinged up in Detroit. Really tough spot there to go against.
All right, Gary, it sounds like the Lions are the weakest link in this three-team parlay.
Yeah, even at 21-1, I don't think I could put any money on a bet that has the Lions taking down the Chiefs today. I mean, obviously Stafford is such a massive part of the reason why there's such hesitation to back the Lions, but it's not the only injury of note they have either. Like Darius Slay is not going to be active for this game, so now we're talking about a team a defense without arguably their best player trying to stop Patrick Mahomes in a dome. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Julian, Raiders are 6.5-point road underdogs in Indianapolis. Is that spread too high or too low? And hook us up with the DFS play from this game.
So I thought this spread was just right around 7, but then we have all these injuries on Indy, on the defense as well as T.Y. Hilton. I think at 6.5, I'll still lean with the home team. I think Indy can get it done. I think they're the better team. I've been fading the Raiders since the middle of the summer, and they just continue to unwind. I just don't have that much faith in all the Colts' injuries, though. But in the end, I have to fade the Raiders here, and I'll continue to stick with Indy. However, I will look to the Oakland side for a DFS play. Darren Waller's been so good at tight end. Caught 13 of 14 targets last week, had the best game of his 3-game season so far. And a lot of the guys on that Indy defense that would presumably be in coverage against him are either banged up or out with injuries. So I think Waller's going to continue to be a fantastic play in this game.
Gary, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty much going to echo everything Julian said. I think really it's important that this game moved from 7 to 6.5. I think that's just such an important half-point swing when you consider, touchdowns, obviously. But the Colts, I think they've just proven time and time again that they are a very deep team, whether that is having to start Jacoby Brissett, whether that's having to get through the injuries to Darius Leonard and Malik Hooker that Julian referenced. I think they've got enough depth to take down a Raiders team that has struggled immensely since week 1 at home on that artificial surface. They've just been so good. They're 4-1 ATS their last 5 games playing on artificial turf. They've just got that great home field advantage. So I think I'm still going to lean with the Colts on this one. But Waller is just too good to ignore at 5-2 for all the reasons that Julian talked about. But an important thing to note when it comes to these high-end tight ends as well on this particular slate, you're going to have so many people paying down at tight end this week that Waller's probably not going to see the ownership that he deserves to see because he is over 5K. So I think that's another reason to like him in GPP formats.
Steven, you with these guys?
Yeah, I think the Colts still are able to pull this one out. Like, even without T.Y. Hilton, Brissett looked sharp last week. He really spread the ball around. All of their receivers saw no more than 3 targets, but, Pascal, Campbell, Deion Kane, all these guys should be in the mix there. And then the Raiders haven't been exactly that great against tight ends either. You still got Eric Ebron. You still got Jack Doyle here. So there's still a lot for him to spread the ball around here. For a DFS play, though, I am going to stick with the Raiders. Terrell Williams is very, very active in the red zone for the Raiders. He's accounted for 40% of their red zone receptions so far this season. So if they end up getting down the field, Waller is a popular play. He's going to get the targets. He's going to get the receptions, but it's been Williams in the red zone thus far. So I think he could be one that, not exactly vulture, but he could be the one that surprises with the touchdown in this game.
Gary and the Titans are getting 3.5 points against the favorite Falcons. Too high or too low?
I think it's too high. This is my George Costanza game of the week, where I'm just going to go against everything my gut tells me is right and is the likely outcome of this game. I never get the Titans right, and I feel like the Titans always show up in spots where people don't think they have any chance of winning. Vice versa with the Falcons, who seemingly always disappoint. And to that point, they are 2-7 ATS their last 9 games against losing teams. The Falcons just don't win games they should win, whereas the Titans always do the opposite of what you think they're going to do. I mean, Marcus Mariota might throw for 4 touchdowns today just because, he needs to be paid as a starting quarterback for the next 4 years. So I'm just going to take the Titans here. Give me the points. I think that's the way to go in a game where I don't like either of these teams. And to that point, when you really talk about the DFS option in this game, it's slim pickings. I mean, I guess you could talk yourself into Derrick Henry at 6'3", but maybe Atlanta's defense at 2,900. The Titans' offensive line has been atrocious, especially in that game against Jacksonville on Thursday night. They have the highest adjusted sack rate in the entire league. So you might see some points racked up by the defensive line of the Falcons.
Take it away, Steve.
I mean, I'm going to go opposite of Gary here. I'm going to trust the Falcons, even though they have been brutal against the spread, even going back to last season. But I just don't see enough from the Titans here. Marcus Mariota has just looked absolutely abysmal this season. The only way I can see the Titans winning this game is if they get Derrick Henry going on the ground. I think that's a way that they can actually steal this from the Falcons here. But in terms of DFS, Julio Jones is in a fine spot here. He's going to see Malcolm Butler in coverage. Butler has been absolutely torched in coverage. He's been targeted against 21 times, 15 receptions, 198 yards, 3 touchdowns. Now he has to try to cover Julio Jones. Yeah, I'll take all the Julio Jones this week in DFS.
All right, Jules, how much do you trust the Falcons?
I don't trust either of these teams. I absolutely hate this game. I had a betting article on DK Nation this week. My stay away spot was this game. I don't like either side of this spread at all. But you are making me pick it. I will roll with the Titans plus 3.5 because I'll take the points and I think this could be a grinded out field goal game, and I don't trust either team. So if I have to play it, I'll take the 3.5 points. But like Atlanta, Garion gave a great number there against losing teams. Atlanta is also 0-12 against the spread in their last 12 games against the AFC. But the Titans are a ridiculous team to try and project. They, like Garion said, they never do what you think they're going to do. So just to be clear, this is a complete stay away spot for me, which has me just taking the points if you force me into it. And since I'm rolling with the Titans, I guess I'll roll with Derrick Henry at $6,300 if the game script goes the way that I'm leaning here. But the Julio Jones aspect is also something to consider because Keenan Allen's going to be so highly owned up in that same price range that you'll get really low ownership in tournaments on Julio.
Steven, let's go to the 4 o'clock games. Rams are favored by 9 points against the Bucks. Too high or too low?
I honestly think this is a little too low. I think the Rams should blow out the Buccaneers in this one. The Buccaneers' run defense has been fantastic, but it's not been a focal point of the Rams' offense. Even airing out the ball, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for Jared Goff, but it should be a good thing in this game here. We've seen Jameis Winston with these bonehead decision-making. Bruce Arians still hasn't been able to right the ship with him so far. And their secondary, the Rams' secondary, has just been so elite that this is a game where Mike Evans might have trouble catching the ball. Chris Godwin is coming into this game banged up. There's just not enough to like about the Buccaneers and a lot to like about the Rams in this one. So I think it's too low. I think the Rams end up blowing out the Buccaneers in this game.
What do you think, Jules?
Yeah, anything under 10 is too low in this game. The Rams looked really good in Cleveland defensively against that Browns offensive line and Baker Mayfield, and now they face an even worse defensive line in Tampa, an even more mistake and turnover-prone quarterback in Jameis Winston on the road, and then Jared Goff's home road splits are really in favor of him playing at home. So I think everything sets up for a 17, 20, 23-point victory for the Rams here in a really big way, and Cooper Kupp's got to be the guy at 6,500 from a DFS angle. He's Goff's go-to guy. He has at least 9 targets in every game. He's been a red zone target that's been very efficient, caught those 2 touchdowns in Cleveland. I think Kupp has a huge game in a Rams blowout victory.
Gary, bring us home.
Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff that makes me want to consider the Bucs. They are 3-0-1 ATS their last 4 games on the road. And when you look at the Rams' strength of schedule so far this season, they barely beat an injured Cam Newton. They won a game where Drew Brees was injured midway through the second quarter, And they looked, not great on the road against Cleveland last week. So have they had a defining win yet? Not really. At the same time, I still think this spread is a little bit too low. I would still consider betting the Rams at 10, at 11. So I just think for a lot of the reasons these guys already said, Jared Goff's home road splits being a major one, their offense is just going to be too good in this contest, and their defense has looked very sound so far this season. And to back up the Cooper Kupp point, 6,500 for a guy who right now is the number one receiver in this offense. His target share is just under 29%. He's also going up against MJ Stewart in the slot, who is allowed more yards per route covered than any cornerback in football who's covered at least 200 routes dating back to the start of last season. This is a smash spot for him.
All right, guys, let's go to YouTube, take some questions. Julian, Dalvin Cook or Austin Eckler?
I mean, ideally both, but if you're going DFS, you got to pay for Eckler. This could be a career game for him going against Miami. Melvin Gordon probably not going to play much, and they shouldn't be afraid, the Chargers, to run Eckler into the ground because they're going to be able to split him and Gordon moving forward.
Steve, do you agree with that?
Yeah, and this is a tough matchup for Cook. Obviously, he can get his PPR points through the air, which is fine, but he's got a tough run defense he's going up against. At least Eckler has the good matchup. Even if he doesn't play this whole game, he's just got a plethora of options in front of him before he gets taken out, if he does get taken out. So you got to roll with Eckler here.
Okay, Garion, Hardman, Tyrell Williams, or John Ross to PPR? I'm assuming they want you to select one.
It's close between Hardman and between Tyrell Williams, who I do like this week, but I'm just going to side with Hardman. It's hard not to get a piece of the Chiefs' offense the way they're looking right now, especially, once again, in that dome in Detroit.
And Steven, Winston or Allen?
I don't know which Allen that
maybe
is.
it's Kyle Allen or?
Yeah. I'll put it this way. I'm not going to play Jameis Winston in this game. I have too much respect for the Rams secondary. I don't think he's going to get much through the air this week. So whatever Allen you're considering, that would be the answer.
Yeah, so maybe it's Josh Allen too. I mean, who the hell knows? We love some details here, people. Okay, thanks, guys. We got some game totals and prop bets coming up here in a couple minutes. But first, it's Adam Kaufman talking to Nick Eatman of DallasCowboys.com. Can they go 4-0? Let's find out.
Nick Eatman covers the Cowboys for DallasCowboys.com. He's been doing it 20 years, and this one projects to be one of the more fun seasons, I think. Adam Kaufman with you. Nick, 3-0 for the first time since 2008. All of those double-digit wins, so obviously it's been a good time. We knew the last one against the Dolphins would be a laugher. It was, but what's your biggest takeaway from the Cowboys' perfect start?
Well, I think just, they're doing what they're supposed to do. They're coming out. They're balancing the ball around, mixing it up on offense, and this combination of run, pass, and everybody's getting in there. They've had some injuries, and they've been able to kind of withstand that early on offense. And I think everyone thinks that, yes, the schedule will be tougher, but also the defense can play better as well. So, it's early. I mean, we'll find out. I mean, maybe the Cowboys aren't as good as everyone thinks right now just because of, who they're playing on the schedule. It's a small sample size, but all you can do is not only, beat who's in front of you, but blow them out. And that's kind of what they've done. So, I think there's some guarded optimism, but they are playing well, especially in the second half when they're it's time to really turn it on. They've been able to do that.
So that's where I wanted to go, because you look at these first few games, again, Giants, Redskins, Dolphins, these are teams that are supposed to pad a record. So do you think the Cowboys are as good as most of us all think?
I do think that they're pretty good. I like everyone, I'm ready to see them with a big test, and I don't know if it's going to get as tough as it will Sunday night against New Orleans, against a team that I don't know if they're desperate, but they definitely need to win and win at home, and especially with Breeze out. So it'll be a very, very good game. I think that the Cowboys are good, though. I think that their offense is balanced. They got one of the best offensive lines in the league. They got a lot of different weapons. They got a quarterback playing at a high level, and they got a defense with some playmakers that still haven't seen them really get to that elite level yet. So, you put it all together, I think that they're going to be able to beat, anybody or compete with anyone. But you don't know until you find out, and we're probably going to find out in the next 2 weeks.
When it comes to offenses, obviously, we always tend to highlight the skill guys. That's, nature of working in fantasy. But as you mentioned, it really starts with the offensive line. And, ask a guy like Andrew Luck over the years about how important it is to have a good offensive line. There in Dallas, obviously, you do. And so Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper, they've been that three-headed monster so far and consistent as well. But can they keep up that consistency?
Well, again, like we're always saying, we'll find out. I think they can because, like you said, that offensive line is really stout, and it allows them it allows Dak to go through all of the reads. He says there were plays he went through 4 or 5 reads, just in one play, and you can do that when you've got a line that holds its own like the Cowboys do, and paves the way for the running backs and all that. So, yes, to answer your question, I think they can. I think that they will. They're going to have some tough challenges along the way, but it's just kind of how they adapt to that. I think Kellen Moore's done a nice job calling plays so far. So it's that tough balance as a play caller. Do you want to be different and innovative each week, one step ahead, or do you also want to do what we do? And I think finding a good balance of those two things is the key for any coordinator.
Zeke still did not have a heavy workload in week 3. 19 carries. He performed well, 125 yards, but you even had Tony Pollard cross the century mark as well. Will we see a shared system while Elliott continues to kind of get up to speed after holding out during training camp?
I don't really think that they're trying to do that. Against the Dolphins, it was 13-2 were the carries, the Zeke to Pollard. Then the game started getting out of hand, and Pollard took over, and it ended up being, I think, about 18 to 13 or something like that. Or you said 19 to 13. But,
right.
I don't think that's the plan, is to mix it up that much. I think if that game would have been closer, Zeke would have had more in the 25, 26 range. So just the way the games have gone and allowed, in the fourth quarter, the Cowboys, I believe, were up by, 25 points maybe against the Giants, and 17 against the Redskins, and of course, 25 against the Dolphins. So it allows you to play Pollard, but I don't think in these closer games, I think Zeke will be handling more.
Okay.
Welcome back to DraftKings' The Sweat. If you're just joining us, welcome to the party. I'm Jessie Coffield.
Thank you.
He's Emerson Lotzia. You've been here. And we're bringing you all the way up to kickoff at 1 p.m. with the latest and greatest DFS and betting analysis and advice.
Yes, all that you just said is a fact. Before we continue, though, let's take a little minute here to update some actives and key inactives, just in case you guys haven't been keeping up, or if you're just getting up because you had a long night. Matthew Stafford active, Julian Edelman active, Melvin Gordon, he's active, but I probably wouldn't put him in your lineup.
Right.
Reportedly only going to play in emergency situations. Mark Andrews active, Rex Burkhead active. List of inactives goes like this: Albert Wilson, T.Y. Hilton, Terry McLaurin. Yeah, so all you Washington fans out there, everyone's been high on his fantasy value. Do not put him in your lineup. Devin Singletary, guy's not going to play for the Bills against the Patriots. Danny Amendola and then Darius Slay. Inactive.
Now listen up, because this part is important. I know we talk a lot, but this show actually isn't about us.
No, well,
we've heard about
it's
that.
Definitely about me.
We'd like to hear from you and even answer some of your questions on today's show. So however you're watching us, you can interact with the show on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Go ahead and ask your DFS or Sportsbook questions, and we just might answer it later on in the show. Very exciting.
That is very exciting stuff, but let's bring in more exciting people. This dynamic duo, DraftKings contributor Jeff Ulrich and the fantasy girl Rosalie Michaels. Guys and gals, this is over-under, so we're going to need your takes on whether these game totals and player props will go over or under their projected numbers. Like Washington, the New York Football Giants have a game total set at 48.5. You going over or under, Jeff?
I think with the news that Terry McLaurin is out for Washington, I'm definitely going under. I always thought this was a little high for two teams who, quite frankly, are both in the running for the number 1 pick at the end of the year. I know both of these defenses are terrible, especially their secondaries have just been completely, getting burned every week. But I really think you look at this, how is Washington going to put up points without McLaurin with the big play, running Adrian Peterson, throwing to Vernon Davis? I just don't know if there's enough firepower there for Washington. And then if the Giants get up big here, there is a chance they just take their foot off the gas. Again, they're without one of their best players in Saquon Barkley. I think people are just forgetting that all these explosive players are now out. So I'm pretty happy taking under 49.5 here, quite frankly.
You pretty happy taking the under, Rosalie, or are you going elsewhere?
No, shockingly, I am disagreeing with Jeff, right?
Oh, wow.
That never happens.
Yeah, that never happens.
With my wife, I mean, this is...
Or just
That's
women
a
in
little
general,
playful fun.
Jeff.
No, you know what? Like Jeff said, these defenses are terrible. They're horrible. And you know what? The offenses are doing okay. They're scoring some points, especially the Giants now. They're averaging over 400 yards per game and giving up over 450 yards per game. So, yeah, I expect that this is going to be a lot of scoring because nobody can stop anyone. And yeah, you know, Terry McLaurin is out, but they still have Paul Richardson. They still have Trey Quinn, who had 7 targets last week. Wondering if they're going to put Haskins in there if Case Keenum starts to struggle. Daniel Jones can get stuff done. So, and they still have Vernon Davis on Washington's side as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of scoring here. There's going to be a lot of very happy fantasy owners here as well.
Patrick Mahomes versus the Lions. Passing total set at 315.5. Rosalie, will he go over or under that mark?
Yeah, I'm going over. I just don't go against Patrick Mahomes ever anymore. You know, he just shows anytime he goes up against even a really good defense like the Baltimore Ravens that he's going to kick booty. And he's going to do it against Detroit this week. No Darius Slay. Yep.
Jeff, is Mahomes going to kick booty?
I mean, probably. God, I want to take the under here, though. I just do not. I'm going to take the under. I know it's Detroit. This is how Detroit plays. They're really good at limiting teams, playing down to a bit of a slower pace. The only thing that worries me here is the injuries on Detroit's side. And this could get a little bit out of hand if Matthew Stafford somehow leaves this game. But on the other hand, that does happen. It just means Mahomes might throw a little bit less. You look at this, like on the road last year, we saw a couple of his totals, especially towards the end of the year, fall under 300 yards per game. So again, it's the road matchup. It's the matchup against Detroit, who likes to play at a slower pace. I think they're going to be able to run the ball and just kill a little bit of clock in this game. And even just a little bit of a slower pace is going to hurt Mahomes' total. So again, it's nothing against Mahomes, but I am actually going to take the under here.
Jeff, Vikings and Bears, low total, 38.5. What are the chances you think the over hits?
Probably not very good. I mean, you just look at this teams on paper. I mean, Minnesota wants to run the ball. Chicago has like one of the best, if not the best, run defense in the league. Both of these teams play at a slower pace. Mitch Trubisky and Matt Nagy having real troubles getting the ball in the end zone and just sustaining drives. I just can't see a scenario other than like a 20-14 ugly, grinded out type of game. And there's some scenarios here where, you know, one long play or two, definitely the over could hit because it's a low total. But man, I mean, you even just look at the over-unders trends of these two teams, how often they hit the over, and it's pretty much slight losing records on both sides in this spot. So I would take the under here. I know it's not a big total, but this game just screams ugly.
Does it scream ugly in your eyes, Rosalie?
Yeah, it does. I'm actually going to agree with Jeff here. Hey, yeah, it is ugly. With, you know, the most points that the Bears have gotten was last week versus Washington, but we know how bad that defense is. And they lost Taylor Gabriel, one of Trubisky's weapons, as well as the kicker is having issues as well. So it's I don't see this going over that. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be low scoring. I hope there's going to be a lot of Dalvin Cook and because I own him in season long. So that's purely just selfish. But yeah, it's going to be ugly. It's going to be low.
Sonny Michel's rushing total is set at 50.5 with the Pats in Buffalo. Rosalie, do you like him to go over or under that total?
I'm going under. You know, it's just they're not using Sonny Michel quite as much as we expected them to coming into the season. He's only averaging about 15 rushes per game and hasn't caught a pass at all. You know, and between the Steelers and the Jets, he only totaled like 25 yards on 24 carries. But he did have a score versus the Jets, so that helped him. James White is back. Buffalo is giving up like 100 all-purpose yards to running backs, but he's splitting that amongst James White and himself. So yeah, I'm going under for him.
Jeff, you want to take the under on Sony Michel?
I'm gonna disagree with Rosalie, but I'm gonna take the over here. I mean, this is part of me trying to trust the coach speak and what we've heard this week, and also just reading the tea leaves here. But the consensus out of New England is that they want to give Sony Michel the ball more and just get him going, because we saw how effective he was at times, especially towards the end of last year on the Patriots' run to the Super Bowl. He has not been effective this year, but this could be a good spot. I mean, the Bills' run defense arguably is probably the weak spot of their defense. It's a pretty solid defense, but they have allowed 60 yards or more to feature backs on the ground so far. So, I mean, at 50, you're looking like that's a pretty good bet. And then on the other hand, Rex Burkhead is also banged up. So maybe just a couple more snaps for Sony Michel. Maybe that's all he needs to get over here. But this is a pretty low total. It's pretty reachable, especially for the Patriots, who are 7-point favorites. So, yeah, I'd definitely take the over here with Sony Michel.
Great stuff, you two. We are going to bring back Julian and Gary to talk spreads after a preview of tonight's contest between the Cowboys and the Saints.
Unbeaten Cowboys at the Drew Breesless Saints. That's your Sunday night showdown presented by Kentucky Fried Chicken, but this time KFC is Kaufman's fantasy competition, guys. Let's dive in, all right? Adam Kaufman, DK Live's Reed Fowler, Steve Buchanan. Dallas is favored. That does not mean it's got the best player, though, Reed. So who's your Colonel's pick for your captain?
Well, it actually is going to be from Dallas. It's Amari Cooper. And this guy's gotten a lot of touchdowns so far. Look, New Orleans, they're not necessarily good against the receivers. This is kind of their MO. They start really slow against the pass, and they pick up towards the end. Amari Cooper has about 4 touchdowns. New Orleans giving up 5 to the opposing receivers. So give me Amari.
Steve-O, another Cowboy?
No, this time it's going to be from the Saints. It's going to be Alvin Kamara in this spot. You know, the Cowboys have been very good against the run, but one area they've been lacking is passes out of the backfield. We've already seen opposing running backs get targeted against 30 times. They've allowed 20 receptions, over 150 yards, and we just saw Teddy Bridgewater target Kamara 10 times last week, so he's definitely someone that he's kind of leaning on at the moment.
Bukes, who's your next pick?
Yeah, so it's gonna be Randall Cobb here. If there's a way to attack against the Saints, it's with slot receivers, and that's what Randall Cobb is here. PJ Williams is their primary man who covers the slot. He's been targeted against already 15 times, allowing 10 receptions, 108 yards, and a touchdown. It's gonna be a sneaky game for Randall Cobb.
Reed?
Yeah, it's going to be Jared Cook, and if you look at the Saints and then Teddy Bridgewater, he's probably going to go to those intermediate routes. We see when he came in for Drew Brees, he targeted Jared Cook 7 times in that game. Look, he's not catching a lot of balls, but there's a lot of volume. That's what you need in a tight end. Again, he could get in the end zone. Dallas is 6th best for opposing tight ends, so give me Jared Cook.
Okay, we're out of time. That'll do it for the latest installment of the Sunday Night Series presented by KFC, where you can get free chocolate cake. These with any 10-piece bucket meal or larger.
Earlier this week, we introduced a Caption This contest
We did.
on Twitter, on our Twitter page, at SweatDK. So we asked you to caption this picture of Eli Manning and Daniel Jones for a shot at 100 DK dollars.
100 DK dollars. And the winner of the contest is, I certainly hope you're watching, Mr. or Mrs. @WhatMilk_, whose caption read, "When you can't beat a level on a video game and your little brother beats it on his first try." I guess we don't have that. I thought we would show the people the caption, but trust me in the words I just said.
Yeah, and congrats. You're now the proud owner of 100 DK dollars.
That's
very impressive.
@WhatMilk_.
Okay, let's bring in DraftKings contributors Julian Edlow and Gary and Thorne for high or low. Are these spreads or player prop totals too high or too low for these games? Plus, as we do, we're going to get a DFS pick from the matchups. Pretty exciting.
Okay, sounds good. Dolphins, 14-point underdogs to the Chargers. Too high or too low, Jules?
It's too low until we see the Dolphins cover a spread, and this one opened around 16. We've seen it at 16.5, and then the Chargers injury report comes out, and they're going to be without some guys on offense, Mike Williams, Justin Jackson, some guys that play a role, but it doesn't really matter because it's all about how bad this Miami team is, and Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, they're still going to be in there, so until we see the Dolphins do it, I don't see why the Chargers shouldn't be able to win this game by more than 2 touchdowns. And the Miami team total unders are still very much in play because they've scored 16 points this season.
All right. Do you have a DFS play?
Oh, DFS play?
Yeah.
Pretty much anything
okay.
Chargers. I mean, Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen are going to be cash locks to pay up for. If you want to go down, you can get Dontrell Inman for $3K, bare minimum receiver.
Gary, and hey, the Dolphins, they're not 20-point underdogs, so that's not bad, right?
Yeah, they're improving. Look, I won't lie. I was more confident about this take when the line was 16.5, but Week 4, 2019, the Miami Dolphins cover a spread. This is too high. I just don't really have a lot of faith in the Chargers right now, and I still think we're looking at a scenario. I understand that the Dolphins are actively trying to lose football games. I understand they lost another 2 offensive linemen last week. This was a team that really didn't have 2 NFL caliber offensive linemen anyway, so that's a little bit troublesome. But if you go look at DVOA, their schedule has been a nightmare so far. They have faced the number 1, number 2, and number 5 teams in football by that metric. They've had the hardest schedule in the NFL, which has only amplified how awful they are. Still awful, but it's amplified how awful they are. I just don't feel comfortable laying 2 touchdowns on this Chargers team right now. They have not shown me anything that makes me think they are a competent team or a team that can win a game by 2 scores. So I'm going to take the Dolphins to cover, but all your DFS plays, aside from maybe Preston Williams, are like Julian mentioned, your cash locks like Austin Eckler, who should just get a ton of work in this contest before Melvin Gordon comes back.
Panthers at Texans. Kyle Allen has a passing total set at 262.5. Gary, in too high or too low, and you know the drill, DFS play.
I think it's a little high. There's one thing that Carolina has done particularly well so far this season. It's been getting pressure on opposing quarterbacks, and we know that is still a massive flaw with the Houston Texans. And if you kind of turn it around, with Kyle Allen, I just don't think there's not really that big a sample to trust him at this point. I mean, he has faced the Arizona Cardinals defense, which as a whole unit is not all that inspiring, but specifically their secondary is just a laughingstock right now. It's almost gotten to the point where we can't even consider those games part of the season-long totals because they just throw off the numbers way too much. So I think Allen's going to go under that prop, and I do think Houston wins this game by more than 5. So I like that side of it too. As in terms of a DFS play, you can never go wrong with DeAndre Hopkins. And right now, Carolina has funneled a lot of their targets, their opponent targets, to the wide receiver position, up at 78% so far, 3rd most of any team in the NFL. So Hopkins with 10 targets is always going to be a pretty good play.
Jules, how do you feel about Kyle Allen with his passing total set at 262.5?
Ooh. I actually like the spot for Kyle Allen, so I'll take the over here. I think this spread should be more like 3.5, 4. And that's because of the reason that Garion touched on. Carolina is really good at getting pressure on the quarterback. They had 8 sacks last week, and now they'll be facing this Houston offensive line that is so prone to giving up sacks. Watson, the most sacked quarterback in the NFL during his time as a starter. So I think that Carolina's going to get in there on the quarterback, get some pressure, and make this a game. I think that there's a decent amount of DFS plays we can look at. Kyle Allen, I don't expect to be the same guy we saw against Arizona. That was like the perfect spot. I think he'll be good, not great in this game. But I think the Carolina defense at 2,300 is in a sneaky spot for tournaments at least because of that reason I just gave. The sack upside alone here, if they get 6 or 7 of those, I know that's a big number. Let's call it 5 even, and a turnover or 2 maybe. That's pretty good even though they're on the road here. At 2,300, I think they're a little underpriced.
Leonard Fournette, his rushing total is set at 64.5. Is that total too high or too low? Julian, and would he be your DFS play in this game against the Broncos?
I think he would be my DFS play in this game, actually. There are not many DFS plays in this game, maybe defenses, because this total is just dropping in the lowest on the board and should be a real grinder of a game in Denver here. Fournette's probably the safest option because he's the guy that we can project for the most touches in this game, which is why I think he'll get over this rushing number. He looked terrible against Tennessee on that Thursday night game.
Had that one 60-yard run that saved him.
He gained a total of 66 yards in the game and had a 69-yard carry. So you do the math. Not very good. He got it all on one run. So I just think that given the workload that he's going to get, He's going to be better, and this number in the mid-60s, if he gets 20 or so carries, I think he can surpass it.
Gary, you think he goes over 64.5 rushing yards?
Yeah, I do. I like the over here a lot, and I think Julian touched on a lot of the reasons, but one of the things when we're looking at the perception of Leonard Fournette right now that you really have to remember is there's very few running backs in the NFL who have his implied volume. I mean, for as bad as he was, for as underwhelming as he was last Thursday night, he never left the field. He was on for every offensive snap the Jaguars had. There is no game script where he is not still involved in this contest. Now, obviously, we need him more involved in the running game than the passing game for this prop to go over, but I just don't think the Broncos have the type of offense that's going to run away and make this like a 2-3 score game and put the Jaguars in a deep hole. This is going to be a very low scoring contest, one where the Jaguars can be content to just continue to run the football as much as they want, which clearly, as we found out last week, regardless of the results, is a lot. So with both teams having an implied point total below 20, I just think there is no script worry when it comes to Fournette. As for a DFS play outside of Fournette, who's not actually a terrible pivot point around $6,000 at the running back position in GPPs, but Jaguars defense obviously deserves a look. I mean, we're talking about a Denver offensive line that is the 7th worst adjusted sack rate so far this season. Juwan James hasn't played the last 3 weeks. Their right tackle, Garrett Bowles.
Garion,
Yep.
I got to cut you off just because we got to say goodbye to our viewers on News 12 Plus in New York.
All right.
But what you were saying was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it was fantastic. We just had to jump in and cut you off there. But the show isn't over. You'll have plenty more time to give us your takes. So, more of the show here. Coming up, we're going to chase or fade some DFS hot takes, actually.
Yes!
After this edition of Levitan's Leverage.
Week 4 in the NFL has arrived, and so have we. It's another Levitan's Leverage. Adam Kaufman with the man of the hour, Adam Levitan. Levy, let's jump right in, all right? Russell Wilson facing a lousy Cardinals defense on Sunday. Truly horrid. The Seahawks QB just 6,100 after a 44-point performance against the Saints. Kind of looks like a great paydown opportunity to nab him there, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, when you face Arizona, you get to run a lot of plays because of how fast their offense plays, how inefficient their offense is. And then when you have the ball, you get to attack a defense that doesn't have Patrick Peterson. Is just downright terrible. So we've seen every quarterback that's faced the Cardinals flame them so far. I expect Russell Wilson to do the exact same thing. And yeah, he's just way too cheap at 6,100.
Yeah, you would think he'd be priced higher. But one guy who's even beneath him, but different position, that's Kerryon Johnson. 5,400 for the undefeated Lions, believe it or not, through 3 weeks. They've got the Chiefs at home, so that's probably going to end. But Johnson, see, he hasn't been all that efficient to this point. Of course, KC's run defense hasn't either. So is that your motivation?
Yeah, I mean, they got rid of C.J. Anderson 2 weeks ago, and we saw Kerryon Johnson set season highs in carries and in snap rates. So I think it's very encouraging that we're going to see a lot more of Kerryon Johnson. We know now that he'll get the goal line work. We have a suspicion that he'll see more of the pass down work, although Ty Johnson, we worked in there some. And yeah, I mean, running backs against Kansas City is something that I think we want to use, and I just want to be higher than the market on Kerryon Johnson. I think he's a very good player, going to be a star in this league if used correctly. So he's 5,400, and I think that's a really, really fair price for him in this spot.
We've got one more for you, and that is Cooper Kupp. 6,500. The Rams are hosting the Bucs. The receiver has been reliably targeted basically 10 times a game, at least 100 yards the last 2 weeks. Is Jared Goff just going to keep feeding him?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen Jared Goff rely on Cooper Kupp at a higher rate than Brandon Cooks and Robert Woods, and I think it's more than just noise. I think it's a trend at this point. Cooper Kupp clearly 100% off the ACL tear, and in this spot specifically, the Bucs have just been shut down. Defense against running backs, and we've shut down some pretty good run games so far, and so I don't expect Todd Gurley and Malcolm Brown, those guys, to get going. I think it's going to be more of a pass-centric approach, and we've seen the Rams do that in the past when Jared Goff is at home as well, where he has far, far, far greater splits. So very nice spot here for Cooper Kupp.
Do me a favor. Try not to mistake Jerry for a pillow back there.
She's taking a little nap.
Adam Levitan. Thanks, bud.
All right. Good luck.
This is the part of the show that I love because I get to just take a break here. I'm just going to toss it over to Julian Edlow, Steve Buchanan, and Reed Fowler. They're going to debate some of their hottest DFS takes for Week 4. So, Bukes, take it away.
Yeah, so this take was obviously submitted before Terry McLaurin was ruled out. But you know what? I don't care. I'm going to stick with it, and that Case Keenum is going to be one of the highest scoring quarterbacks on this slate this week. That's including with Patrick Mahomes on the slate, Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson. Case Keenum has sneakily been amazing so far this year. He's already tossed for 7 touchdowns.
Amazing.
Average. Yes, he has. See, that's why it's a hot take, Julian, because you didn't even realize because you don't do your research. Averaging 311 yards per game. This Giants secondary is absolutely brutal. Even with Terry out, there's still so many options that he can throw to in this offense because nobody can cover any of these guys. They're not household names. You're not going to feel great about putting them in your lineup, but you know what? That's the name of the game here in DFS. You adapt to what is placed in front of you. Case Keenum, one of the highest scoring quarterbacks on this slate.
You want to take this one?
I'll start with it, I guess. So, for starters, Case Keenum won't be the highest scoring quarterback in this game. Daniel Jones is going to have more fantasy points against a worse Washington defense, especially with Saquon out because of his ability to run the ball. He's going to help there on the ground game. So, Daniel Jones will be the highest scoring quarterback in the game. Case Keenum, have I done my research on him? Well, I've watched some football games, and he stinks. So, fortunately for you, Bukes, the Giants secondary also stinks. So Case Keenum can have a solid fantasy day.
Very good one.
I think that because you can get guys like Paul Richardson for $3,700, Vernon Davis for $3,400, Trey Quinn for the bare minimum $3,000, I think those are good, fine, bargain bin plays. If you want to play Keenum in a GPP, fine. But he's probably not going to be in the top 10 of scoring at the quarterback position, which is the key point.
Well, you think about it, too. What if he doesn't even finish this game? I mean, there have been reports, not reports, but just like indirectly that Dwayne Haskins potentially has the ability. I mean, he's warming up in pregame like he's potentially going to be out in this game. So with that looming over whoever you want to call it, whether it's Gruden, Jay Gruden, or Keenum, who's been in this spot at every other team that he's been on, where there's always the second-string quarterback potentially going to take over first-string duties. I just don't think that, even in this game, like Julian mentioned, Daniel Jones is a little bit better. I mean, there are options out there. Kyle Allen, we talked about it quite a bit in the show, I think is in a little bit better spot than Case Keenum. I will give Steve that, though. It is a hot take because
yeah, that's what I thought the segment was, but sorry.
All right, I'll go next. Tyler Boyd, wide receiver 16 right now projection in terms of DK fantasy points, finishes as a top 5 wide receiver. Okay, top 5 wide receiver. If you look at targets, receptions, top 5, if you just look at what he's been able to do in that offense, Cincinnati is passing it 72% of the time. That is second most. And if you look at Pittsburgh and the Steelers secondary, if you have Edmonds, you have all these guys, you have Hilton, they're not going to be able to guard anybody. And if you just look at what he was able to do last time these two teams met, 7 receptions, 2 touchdowns, I think he's in for a huge game. You still don't have A.J. Green. Get John Ross out of there. Joe Mixon is not necessarily doing anything, and that's why he's probably RB20 and on this slate. But give me Tyler Boyd with all of that production funneling to him, top 5 wide receiver.
I don't hate this.
There we go, yes.
What I do hate is that you're giving us a Monday night take. It's Sunday. I want to make money today. Right. Who's going to make me money today? And that's my problem with your take, Reed. Top 5, maybe a little steep. Top 10, I think he'll be in for sure. I love the Steelers have been the worst team against slot receivers so far this season, just in terms of catch rate, yards. So I feel like the player props aren't out yet for Monday night on DK Sportsbook, but whatever Tyler Boyd's receptions and yardages are at, those are overs that I'm going to be interested in. And just because I want to disagree with Reed, I'll say that he's like the 6th or 7th receiver and finishes in the top 10, and picking a take for Monday night just stinks. Help the people out, bro.
Yeah,
season long.
Here we are on the Sunday afternoon edition of The Sweat, and Reed wants to go to a Monday night.
Oh, he's using Julian's argument against the original.
It's true. Who gives a flipping about the Monday game right now? Nobody does. I'm just saying. Nobody does. Reed, this was just maybe top 5 in the game. I'll give you that. Maybe top 5 in the game. But in the whole entire slate, the game that's not even on this slate, I'm going to say no to this one. I like John Ross a lot more in this game. Thank you very much. Oh. Next time, come next week, maybe a take for a Sunday game, not a Thursday or a Monday.
All right, Case Keenum going to be a QB1. There's my take.
I actually have a hot take for when the Patriots play the Chiefs in week 13 or 14, but we'll get to that next week. So
continue, Julian. Good
I'm going
job.
to continue. My hot take for this week is that Patrick Mahomes will throw for over 500 yards in Detroit. Mahomes, this will be his first NFL game in a dome. He has never played in a dome before. He played 4 games in college, indoors in domes, averaged 492 yards per game. Yes, that's college, not the NFL, but that was 126 yards per game above his average. In terms of attempts per game, he has played a preseason game in a dome. He averaged 11.5 yards per attempt, which is 2.5 yards above his career average in yards per attempt. Darius Slay out for Detroit, already a spot that we thought he was, Mahomes was going to go nuts. Now you take Detroit's best player off the field, who happens to be in the secondary. This spot just sets up, everything is setting up Mahomes. They have no running game, 500 yards.
Well, I will give it to Bagel Boss that he chose the best player in fantasy football.
And then I gave you a 500 burger. You can argue with me on that?
There he goes, yelling again.
Yes.
There's microphones and technology that make sure that you don't have to.
But I want to yell.
Okay, got it. Look, 500 yards, you better do this in the first half, because this game could potentially be over in the first half. Yes, you like the guys on the other side in Detroit, and yes, this defense is not that good, and yes, you can't run on Detroit, and so all of these signs point up, and yes, he's never played in a dome, but he's never played in a dome. Like, he might just do this, he might just get 300 yards and then sit. He doesn't need to play in the second half, and so yes, choose the best player and say 600, 700, 800 yards.
I said 500.
500, it's not going to happen.
Are you done?
I'm done.
So am I.
Whoa!
Later, Bucks.
All right. That's Steve Buchanan walking out in our segment. I guess back over to you guys, Jessie.
I do have a question real quick. Do you guys have a hot take about this wedding ceremony that's going down at the halftime of the Bills-Patriots game?
I have a hot take about it.
I haven't even heard about it.
You haven't?
Jessie,
Is somebody getting lit on fire and thrown through the
I'll
table?
give you my hot take with just my face, okay?
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that blue steel?
That is a hot take.
Well,
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's
great.
it. That should tell you everything you need to know. But, guys, as we said a couple times, we'd like to hear from you. Even answer some of your questions on the show. Yes, so however you're watching us, interact with us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Ask your DFS or Sportsbook questions.
Here we go.
We might just answer it later in the show. We might even answer it.
Oh,
right?
hell.
Meow.
Oh, my God. Here's a great one on Facebook.
Okay, yeah, let's take some.
From a kid named Aiden. Hey, Emerson, love the show, especially love those awesome graphics. Need you to please pick your smartest analyst and ask them who I should
let's
set today.
ask Steve. Let's ask
No,
Steve.
Steve's gone. Steve left.
Reed, our smartest
Steve,
analyst,
go
I will
sit back
ask
down.
you.
Brutal pick.
Hollywood Brown, Josh Gordon, or DeMarcus Robinson, who should he sit? By the way, he ends it with thank you so much and I love you.
Who should he sit?
Yes, who should he sit out of those three?
Don't sit Hollywood Brown.
Okay,
Do not sit Hollywood Brown.
That's not an answer.
He said, who should I sit? Sit the other two guys.
Well, I think
you got to pick one to sit.
I think it's just
Okay,
one.
so sit DeMarcus Robinson because I don't like your take, Julian.
Well,
There
since
we
Patrick,
go.
get out of here, fuck.
Steve's back. Okay.
Steve's back.
Since Patrick Mahomes is going to throw for 500, DeMarcus Robinson
No one's
should probably
asking
be one of
our
the ones
worst
there.
I just came back.
Okay, let's ask Steve one. I have one from YouTube here. Flex spot full PPR, Calvin Ridley or Mecole Hardman?
I got to go with Hardman here. Anytime you can get any type of anytime you can get any piece of the Chiefs offense, you got to roll with that one.
Jules, would you go Fuller over Hardman though in DFS?
You heard what I said about Mahomes. Who do you think you're going to play?
I don't know, man. You want me to walk off too?
Play Hardman.
Why are you pissing everyone off?
Play Hardman.
Okay, boys, let's keep it together. Reed, which DST can you trust, the Steelers or the Colts?
Colts. Raiders are bad.
Good job, Reed.
Let's go Williams or Montgomery? Reed.
There's a lot of
very popular name.
Darrell Williams.
You just can't trust Montgomery right now. He's not getting a full ton of snaps, so Williams.
Okay.
Steve, is OBJ a good play versus the Ravens?
I don't love it. Obviously, Jimmy Smith out of the mix is helpful, but if we're talking about on DraftKings today, I would much prefer Julio Jones in this spot, or even DeAndre Hopkins. He's probably of the three, he would be my number 3 of those guys.
Which DST can you trust? The Steelers?
Oh no, I just asked that.
Same question.
Did you
Keep
just
up,
ask
Emerson.
that? Are you serious?
I did.
The Raiders are
I'm
garbage.
sorry. I'm trying to
God.
read and listen at the same time. You realize how freaking difficult
Look,
that
we
is?
know you can read, okay? We're very impressed. Do you want me to?
All right, find me something. Did you ask DeMarcus Robinson or Paul Richardson?
No.
Okay, great. Steve, go ahead, since you don't make fun of me.
I actually like Paul Richardson in this one. With McLaren out, obviously the targets have to go to somebody, so I like Richardson in this spot.
All right, guys, good stuff. Closing in on lineups locking at 1 p.m. So we're going to get everybody's last-minute take, their last-minute advice before that happens.
What up? It's Pat Mayo from the Pat Mayo Experience. And if you didn't tune in at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time today or any Sunday, give your head a shake. At least I do have some DraftKings sleepers for you, at least low-price sleepers. Me and The Athletics, Chris Meany, going to talk this through just a little bit here. Start at running back. Cheap guys at running back. Here's the thing. None of them are any good. You pay for your volume at running back and go on your way.
Always.
And there's no volume to pay for. Like, Carlos Hyde is the best volume you're going to pay for. That's bad volume.
I'm not interested in Carlos Hyde. Yeah, I don't want to spend any money on him. Honestly, the cheapest I would go today is James White, 49. Wayne Gallman, I'm sure, is going to be pretty chalky, but at $4,600, if he can get 15 touches, we're talking about volume, I think 15 touches is definitely in play for him.
Yeah, that you're not paying for volume with James White, but I particularly enjoy James White this week. I think it's a perfect setup for him with the Bills pass rush, no line, you dump it off. Yeah. He has had the week off. He has baby swag on his side. So I think
10 catches.
I think for me, like White and honestly Josh Jacobs would be the two guys. Like you have Carlos Hyde, Kenyon Drake, Adrian Peterson. Like if you have to pay down, I'd probably take Peterson because he might fall into the end zone.
It could be an AP week. Last week was a Chris Thompson week because they were down in the game. You figure they'll be able to, keep pace at least with the Jets or the Giants rather. So yeah, I could see that. And Thompson is okay too. Like I think he still will be involved. But either again, I'm just not going there.
And the big thing is, like, you don't need to pay down at running back because you can pay down at wide receiver fine. Like, I like Preston Williams a bit, but the return of Albert Wilson means I kind of like Albert Wilson a little bit more in this spot. They're cheap. But the two that I'm really targeting here, Keyshawn Johnson at $3,200, no Damiere Byrd, Michael Crabtree cut, $3,200 for the fastest pace offense in football against a team that gives up 400 passing yards a game. And now Keyshawn Johnson's going to play 80% of the snaps. Boom, I'm in.
Yeah,
that's an easy one.
Ton of volume in week 1 too. Yeah, it is an easy one because they're going to throw the ball a ton there for sure. So yeah, those are very interesting. Dontrell Inman.
Well, $3,000. No Mike Williams, no Virgil Green, probably no Travis Benjamin against Miami. The world will be on Keenan Allen and trying to shut him down.
Right.
Now, I don't think the Dolphins have the personnel to actually do that. No. But $3,000 for a guy that's going to play every single snap. They don't even have backups to come and replace him if they get up by 40 points.
And it's not like he's coming into like a brand new system that he's unfamiliar with or a new quarterback. Like he knows Phillip Rivers. He's gotten touchdown passes before from him. So absolutely, like he's in play. And then another guy I like in a similar range is Paul Richardson. I just feel like they're really running out of weapons there in Washington. And both defenses are just so bad that we could see 50 points in this game. So like a lot of what Richardson did last week came in garbage time. I think he can get a lot of usage in this game too.
Tight ends, everyone's paying down for Will Disley. I get it.
Makes a lot of sense.
It makes an awful lot of sense. Yeah. The problem is he could approach 30% ownership in the Millionaire Maker or even some of these larger DraftKings tournaments. So if you had to go off of them, if you watch Friday's show between Chris and I, OJ Howard's in play.
Yeah.
If we know for sure T.Y. Hilton is out, Eric Ebron's in play.
Yeah.
I don't hate Hawkinson, but those are all risky options where Disley kind of feels safe.
That's what I mean. Like I think you're probably just trying to get too cute to come off the chalk. And sometimes chalk is okay if it is a cheap punt tight end play. And we've seen now what Arizona has done against tight ends. Nothing, right?
I mean, is that a product of teams that just run stuff through their tight end though? I don't know. Because it just seems like they're bad at pass defense.
Well, Detroit hasn't run anything through Hawkinson since that one game. So, I mean, who really knows? But it's just he is an option for Russell Wilson. He found the end zone back-to-back weeks now. So I think you either spend up at the tight end and you kind of, at the same time, pivot off that chalk.
That's the pivot move that you just talked about. You either like Ingram's going to be the chalky guy from the top end.
And Waller will be too.
Yeah, instead of going, but not as much. Yeah. Not as much as Ingram. But instead of going from Disley to an equivalently priced tight end, just rethink the way that you shape your lineup and pay up for Travis Kelce, pay up for Mark Andrews or Waller, and then use one of these cheap wide receivers that we talked about.
Imagine Kelce, like single-digit ownership.
Kelce at 4%.
Oh! Probably going to happen.
Oh! Mahomes, Kelce, Watkins. No one's using it. It's there.
Which is unbelievable to think about.
We're close. We're so close to lineups locking here.
So close to eating lunch.
We got to do quad box right here. We're going to bring in DraftKings contributors Jeff Ulrich, Steve Buchanan, and Reed Fowler, plus the fantasy girl, Rosalie Michaels.
All right, let's remind you guys of the underdog parlay of the week. We had Diego the dog, little handsome
Diego,
fluff
go!
there. The only dog I know that still gets perms, I guess. Look at that.
That's what his fur
thing.
looks like.
I love that guy. Anyway, so his underdog parlay of the week, it's the Jags, Lions, and Washington. And I just had Tom message me the odds boost. Plus 1935 up to plus 2150.
Ooh,
the odds boost for those three teams. But all of our analysts basically
said they're
like
not.
it minus Detroit there. I don't think Detroit has a shot against Jessie. It doesn't. But hey, you never know. Put some
Should
money
we
on
work
it.
up a sweat, though, with these four? I think we should.
Let's do that, please.
Last minute takes on today's slate. So, Reed, what I want to know, is there anyone you loved coming into today that now, after everything, you're pivoting off of?
Yeah, Mark Andrews. I think he's been a tight end stud, right? Especially in season long, but just in DFS, he's been fantastic. You can never really trust a guy, though, that has less than or around 50% of the snaps. That always scares you. And against Cleveland could come out. I know they have a lot of issues in their secondary, but this is a divisional game. So Mark Andrews at less than 50 or around 50% of the snaps scares me.
Steve, anyone you're pivoting off of?
Yeah, it's going to be Will Disley here. I was all about chalk week Will Disley, but as the week's gone on, the ownership on him is going to be insane. It's going to be absolutely crazy. So if there's somebody who can end up busting on the week, it would probably be Will Disley. Like, obviously, the touchdowns that he's gotten, I almost said home runs, still baseball time. The touchdowns that he's gotten have been a huge help, but otherwise he's only averaging about 41 yards per game. And then you look at the injuries that the Lions are dealing with. T.J. Hawkinson is the same exact price. He's in a very good matchup here. Obviously, his floor is almost next to nothing, but if there's a matchup for him to kind of bust back out of that little mini 2-week slump, this would probably be the one, especially Matt Stafford. He's kind of hurting a bit with the hip. Maybe he's not throwing downfield as much, doing some quick checkdowns or whatnot. So I think Hawkinson is actually a really good pivot there in a game that obviously is going to have a lot of points to be scored.
Rosalie, who are you pivoting off of?
Well, surprisingly, it's actually Phillip Rivers. It's obviously you want to target that Miami defense, but much like what Steve said, I think there's going to be a lot of chalk on Phillip Rivers because of that. But also, the more you look at it, the more it feels like this is just going to be a huge Eckler game. Season long, obviously you're starting them, but there's just so many great options at quarterback this week with Wilson for $100 less versus AZ, who and they have a fumble-prone running back right now in Seattle. So I think we're going to see a lot more Russell Wilson. And then they're playing against a fast-paced Arizona offense. And then you have Daniel Jones all the way down at 5,300. And both of them also have run equity, which Phillip Rivers does not. So I'm kind of off Rivers this week.
Jeff, who are you off?
I'm kind of off the entire New York-Washington game. It really does worry me with Case Keenum coming in banged up, who I kind of liked at the start of the week as a cheap QB option. And then Terry McLaurin ruled out. I'm just not sure how Washington is going to be able to put up enough points here. And I really think if Washington doesn't put up points, it's going to draw down the fantasy upside of guys like Daniel Jones, Evan Ingram on the other side. So I'm kind of looking to fade this game. You're going to get some higher ownership there. I think the injury news is not good for just the upside potential in this game. So I'm really looking to kind of switch off that entire game if I can.
Alrighty, Jeff, how about you answer this for me? Who was your favorite value play of the day?
Favorite value play is probably going to go to Miami. Preston Williams. I'm going back to the well here. 12 targets last week. Look, if Brian Flores knew how to use the challenge system, Preston Williams ends last week with probably over 100 yards and a touchdown because he basically had a touchdown. They just didn't review it. So 12 targets at 3,900 going up against the Chargers pass defense that, quite frankly, hasn't been that good this year. Casey Hayward also banged up in this game. Looks like he's going to be active, but this spot isn't as bad as it seems. The spread here is actually a little bit close. You might even get a closer game than you think with the Dolphins passing a little bit more late. I really like the improved play from Josh Rosen. I think Preston Williams with Albert Wilson out is all kinds of upside still.
Rosalie?
Yeah, I'm looking at Kenny Stills at 4,200. He has 22% of the target share down there in Houston. He's replaced Kiki Kuti as the number 3 wide out. And you know what? Last week he had a pretty good showing, 89 yards on 4 catches, and led the team last week. Hopkins still seems to be nursing those ribs, and so we've seen some lower production out of him. So I like Kenny Stills this week.
And that leaves you, Reed, as well as Steve.
Well, this one double dips on me disagreeing with Jeff and him saying the spread is close in Miami at 14. And then it gives you an idea. Josh Rosen looking better. You can't look any better than the worst absolute spot. So, no, I agree with that. That should have been on our hot take segment there. But it's Paul Richardson at 3,700 if you look at just that matchup. And yes, you do have it exactly why, to Jeff's point, that F1, whatever this guy's nickname is, Terry McLaurin, he is out. I think Paul Richardson, who's got back-to-back touchdowns now in back-to-back weeks, he goes up against a guy, Baker, at the cornerback, who's given up, I believe, 2 touchdowns and close to 300 yards in the first 3 weeks. I mean, Paul Richardson, at his price tag at 3,700, even if McLaurin was in, I think would have been a nice pivot spot.
Steven, value.
Yeah, sticking with that, the Houston Texans, I actually like Will Fuller a lot in this spot. His price point at 4,500 is very friendly to build your rosters. And with the Panthers, they've actually allowed the most target to opposing wide receivers 2s in the league. Obviously, Hopkins is by far the #1 option here. But then it kind of gets a little dicey after that. But I think Fuller has been someone that we expected a lot more from. The ownership on him is going to be next to none. I can't imagine him being higher than 10%. And that's probably even giving him a little too much here. I think Will Fuller at that price point is in a really good spot here to kind of bounce back and give us those big yardage games that we expect from him.
All right. I mean, is there anyone that you think we should absolutely be fading today, Reed?
Yeah, Julian Edlow on Twitter. No.
Okay.
It's going to be Sony Michel. I mean, he's been outsnapped by Burkhead last week, 17-56. And if you just look at, even though he has a touchdown upside, he's not been targeted once. And New England is one of the most target-heavy teams to their running backs. Obviously, you have James White there. Buffalo is really hard against opposing running backs, only giving up the 11th fewest DK fantasy points. So get Sony out of your lineups.
Steve, anyone you're thinking we should absolutely fade?
Yeah, I'm totally off of Mike Evans this week. I think a lot of buzz is going to be going around him because he had that massive game last week against the Giants. But comparing these two secondaries is literally night and day. Like, the Giants have one of the worst in the league, while the Rams have one of the best. And obviously, Evans is a very talented receiver, but this is a Rams secondary that has really just been shut down all season long. Whether he's facing Talib or Peters in coverage, he's not going to be having easy coverage in front of him. So I think Evans is an easy fade. There's other receivers I'd much rather pay up for, like Beckham, Julio, DeAndre Hopkins. They're all in much better spots than Mike Evans. So don't let last week's game log fool you. It's in a very tough spot here in week 4.
Rosalie, who do you think we should fade?
I'm fading, and I know a lot of people are really high on him, but I'm fading Tyrell Williams versus Indianapolis. And he only had 3 targets last week, and his catching and receiving yardage totals have been trending downward through the past 3 weeks. That first game, he had a great game, and everybody got excited about him. But Derek Carr just cannot find the open receivers downfield right now. And he relies on his tight end again, just as he did last year. This is going to be a Waller game again, so I'm fading Tyrell Williams.
Jeff, who are you fading?
This one is so easy. It's Will Dissly, like I've been saying the whole week. 3,600. Where did this guy even come from? Go back to the start of the year. I'm sure most people didn't even realize he was on the Seattle Seahawks, let alone play football. There's a reason for this, people. He's just not really a pass-catching tight end. He doesn't have any kind of metrics that would suggest he's going to bust out a big play. Yes, I know it's the Arizona Cardinals, and they just pretend like the tight end position doesn't exist, but doesn't really guarantee you anything. With the amount of chalk coming in on him, I think he's a really easy fade. Go up to Austin Hooper, maybe play O.J. Howard, or go down to T.J. Hawkinson. But look, with the chalk on a guy like this is generally one of the spots where it's a good fade. I'm sure he's going to catch like 3 passes for 2 touchdowns and 30 yards now that I've said this.
Good edge there, Jeff.
For me.
I wouldn't hate that. He is on my team. Let's go slate approved picks real quick before we hit some questions. Reed, need a 1 o'clock slate approved pick and a 4 o'clock slate pick.
Yeah, well, just because I disagree with Julie, I mean, Patrick Mahomes is in a great spot. But let's go to Julio Jones. I think when you have that matchup against Malcolm Butler, if he gets him, he's got a height advantage, skill advantage, every advantage imaginable. So I like Julio in that 4 o'clock game. Tyler Lockett, man, he is in a great spot. Attack those receivers. He is the #1. His target share has increased up to 30% over the last 2 weeks, around an average of 32%. So give me those 2 guys.
Steven, go.
Yeah, I'm not even going to, try to get cute here. Patrick Mahomes in the first half. I mean, the guy just throws up so much. I mean, he's not going to get 500 yards like some other people on this show think he will, but obviously he'll do his due diligence here. And then for the late games, Russell Wilson. I think Russell Wilson is one of my favorite plays on this slate altogether. He's actually probably my QB2 aside from Patrick Mahomes here, but I just love the spot for Russell Wilson and the Seahawks as a whole, so give me those two guys.
Rosalie.
I'm going early game. I'm going Darren Waller versus Indianapolis. You know what that is? The Oakland offense. Indianapolis is not great against the tight end. They've given up 2 touchdowns. And Waller is getting all the targets. 14 targets last week. Had a huge game. I think it's back-to-back weeks for him. He hasn't been worse than 6 receptions for 66 yards. And, this is going to be a big game for him. So I like him. And then in the late game, I'm seeing eye to eye with Steve. That's not shocking, though. I'm going Russell Wilson, too. It's a great matchup for him. Arizona is terrible against the quarterback. 32 fantasy points a game. Give me.
Jeffrey.
I'm going to go Marlon Mack in the early games. Oakland gave up like a bajillion rush yards last week. I think we're seeing rush defense start to kind of regress back to what it was last year, which is not good. Marlon Mack is just playing a ton of snaps. He's going a little bit under the radar. Definitely been productive. Obviously, Indianapolis kind of wants to run the ball with no Andrew Luck. In the late games, I'm going to go off the board a little bit. Robert Woods was fantastic for the Rams last year. He's still been getting targets. But this is just a breakout spot. The Tampa Bay secondary, and realistically, any one of those Rams wide receivers could have a massive day. I think it's a great spot to deploy Robert Woods and GPPs, though.
We got under a minute, but we're going to take some of these questions that we're getting. Reed, we have one here. Chicago or New England defense?
New England.
Steve, Burkhead or White?
White, by far.
Will Fuller or Mecole Hardman for DFS? Jeff?
Hardman.
Kyle Allen or Matt Stafford with his injury? Rosalie.
I'm going Allen. I'm not a Stafford fan. Going Allen.
Reed, someone wants to know biggest upset of the day.
Could be Buffalo. I know I just said New England defense, but could be Buffalo.
Okay, that's all we have time for, you guys. This is The Sweat. We'll be back next week at 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. We'll see you then.